All right, folks, today we have a very special guest, is Zina Castro Sharperson, and she is invited because she is not just an entrepreneur. She is a special guest because it's Hispanic Heritage Month, and she is Latinx. She is a Hispanic or a Latin or Latina entrepreneur. You call it whatever you want, but you know what we mean. And she has a very exciting story that we want to share with you, especially you young entrepreneurs who are saying, wow, what's different for me as a Latin or Latino or Latina entrepreneur? What am I going to face? What are my challenges? And I think Zina has, well, to begin with, welcome on the show. So I'm just going to jump right in, ask you to tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into entrepreneurship.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you so much, Roger, for having me. My name is Zina Castro Sharperson. Sharperson through marriage, Castro through birth. My parents are natives of Honduras. My father was born in Awang, a small town on the coastline of Honduras. My mom was born in Travesilla. My dad came to this country, to the United States, at a very young age, at the ripe age of 21 years old. Came here for opportunity. While he was in Honduras, he received education very early on. He traveled. He went to school in Mexico as well. My mom was a domestic officer when they finally got married, and she was a disciplinarian. Always kept me in check. I'm the middle of three children. I have an older brother and a younger sister. My parents were our foundation. Encouraged us the importance of education, but also the importance of formal education in the classroom, but also education at home. And what that potentially looked like. My dad was an entrepreneur very early on, took on a lot of leadership roles as far as when there was a lot of unrest due to classism in Honduras. He was the one that was always in the front line advocating for everyone. Always enforced and encouraged us to believe in ourselves, that there was always a level of self-reliance, but then there was also a need to need others, and that to also give back. So growing up, again, we were encouraged that education was first and foremost, but that experiences and exposure would help to develop who we would become. And he also, as much as he encouraged that we, in order for us to learn and to eventually open up businesses of our own, that we had to learn from someone. So it was go to school, get a good job, learn as much as you can, but eventually when you had the opportunity to move on and perhaps open something of your own, that you had the skill sets and the ability to do that.
That's such an incredible story. You know, I hear a lot of folks when they talk about their journey into entrepreneurship or, you know, starting their own business, things like that. They come from very different backgrounds. I mean, some come from backgrounds that were impoverished. They didn't have, you know, that support from the family. They basically just motivated themselves and pulled up their bootstraps and kept going forward. But I want to emphasize here the importance of having that kind of family support, that encouragement that comes from the people that matter most to you as a child, you know, your parents and your family. And I think that's an incredible resource to begin your journey as an entrepreneur. So that gave you, I imagine, a lot of confidence to believe that you could do what you wanted to do. So at what point did you say, you know what? I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to do the things that I want to do. I don't necessarily want to work the rest of my life in a 9-to-5 job, listening to someone else tell me what to do. I mean, does any of those things run through your head? And when did that happen?
Listen, well, you know, originally when I went into college, I thought I was going to be a doctor. Yes, I thought I was going to be a doctor. In high school, I had went to Midwood High School. I was in the pre-med program there. And I realized as I started to pursue my medical career that I couldn't stand the sight of blood. I was like, there's no way.
That's a challenge. Yeah.
There's just no way, right?
No way, yeah.
So then eventually, right. But I always knew that I was a person for the people. And what that meant was that if there was anyone that needed any kind of assistance or if they needed some kind of advocacy or they needed a cheerleader, it was always me. Yay, you can do it. You can do it. So as time went on, I've worked in different industries. I've worked for public sector. Well, I'm currently working for public sector right now, but I've worked for private sector, and I realized that a lot of the things that I encountered from my superiors or the leadership within the corporations and things like that, I was like, I could do that too. Because again, my foundation encouraged me that if there's anything that you want to do, go get it. So as a result of that, I started dabbling into different things. And eventually I decided that I wanted to try my hands at teaching. So I started teaching at the college for about a year. And then I sat there and I said, well, really and truly, we're all life teachers anyway. I said, because you can encounter someone outside in the street and you say something to them and they're like, wow, I learned something new today, and vice versa. So, in life, I always felt that I was a teacher in some way, shape, or form. And then after a while, I said, well, with all of this knowledge that I have to share based on all the experiences that I've had, why not sit there and share it with other people and have the ability to make money at the same time, right? Because everyone lives to make money or some form of income. So then eventually, to supplement what I was doing on a full-time basis, I decided to pursue other options. And as a result of that, it eventually started to grow and flourish. So I said, well, okay, this is not bad, right? So, that eventually led to one venture, and then it led to something else. And, I've always sat there and heard my parents say that it's important to have some form of stream of income, but multiple streams are better, because then what happens then is that if one happens to fold, then at least you always have something to fall back on. And that's where the whole entrepreneurial spirit came in.
Let me stop you there, because I think on the phone call that we had, we talked about the eggs in the basket, which is something that I live by. Not this, thing where you have one job or one source of income, and if it fails, or or something bad goes wrong and you don't longer have it, now how are you going to live? And so you got to struggle to figure out something quickly. But having multiple streams of income is a key thing. Tell us about some of those ventures that you jumped in, because it seems that there's a little discovery there that happened at some point where you said, oh yeah, this is working. Oh my God. And then, I gave you the confidence to maybe jump in. Tell us a little bit about some of the ventures that you have started, and describe them a little bit for our audience.
Okay. Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a people's person. So anything that requires that I interact with people, I love it. My daughter always laughs at me. She sits there and says, my God, you go everywhere. You go outside and you make friends with everyone. And I said, no, I mean, we're human beings. We have the ability to communicate amongst any other creature on this earth. So why not talk to people? You'd be surprised what you learn. So she's antisocial. But anyway, so I have conversations with people and I'm like, oh, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And they're like, oh, well, everybody needs something somehow, somewhere that they're not necessarily getting. So I recall when sometime back, my parents were relocating back and forth, and we ended up hiring this real estate agent. So she's showing us all these properties and things like that. And I'm saying to myself, she's pretty good, but I'm probably better. So then I sat there and eventually I decided that I wanted to go into real estate. So I eventually, within a month's time, I ended up getting my real estate license. Completed the 75-hour course, took the exam, took the state exam, and then I completed my real estate license. Then I decided that I like to shop. That's one of my downfalls. Everyone has their addiction, so don't judge me. So I decided that I would start an online business of reselling merchandise. So what I would do is I would buy merchandise at wholesale and then resell. And then that took off.
Wow.
And then I decided mentoring, because I encounter so many students on a regular basis. And then eventually I started to mentor young women of color. So in interacting with people, I've come to realize that there's a need in different areas, and anywhere that I'm able to accommodate that area, I make it into a business, because not only is there ability to help people, but there's also, again, the ability to make some money off of it to supplement what it is that I do on a regular basis. In addition to that, you end up helping people to serve as a vessel to get them from one place to another.
You know, what I love about this is the fact that you talk and listen to people and identify not only opportunities, but needs, right? And I think I hear that story a lot, even with the younger founders that we come across in our program with the Blackstone LaunchPad. There's a lot of young people that, encountered something. Maybe it was a physical, you know, a physical thing that they encountered that they felt they could fix. Maybe it was a product that was missing. Maybe someone said something to them and that, that struck a chord, and they said, oh, you know what, I could do that. And it sounds like you've done that a lot in your life. When you look at, and let's call them Latinx for now, because that's the new term. I think it's a better term than, the traditional Hispanics, and I think Latinos
Right.
still carry weight. But having taught multicultural marketing, I always told my students, identify yourself. Let us know who you are and where we can find
Exactly.
you, and we take it from there, right? Being Cuban American, but being born in Cuba, being from a family that spoke primarily Spanish, and then,
Right.
being of that generation where I was like, I kind of pushed it away from me at that age. I didn't want to be, Cuban. I want people to identify me as Latino, so I changed my name from Rogelio to Roger to prevent that, and then
Right.
there was an awakening and I went, what am I doing? And I totally
Exactly.
re-embraced all that. And now I'm so happy that I did that. But I also encountered that there were specific obstacles in making that discovery that Latinos face, not just in getting into the workplace, because I did see that, but in school, and even when I moved into my neighborhood, but particularly when you try to raise money or you try to create a business or you try to, navigate those channels that maybe other folks have an easier time doing. What are some of those things that you've
Right.
identified, not just in your case, but maybe in some of the people that you've spoken to, that Latinx face when they're trying to start a business?
For me, Roger, I believe that it's so important and it's encouraging when you look up in the front of a room, or if anywhere that you go and you look around and you see people that look like you, or the people that can relate to the struggles that you may have experienced, because it makes it easier, but it also makes it more relatable. For me, it's kind of like a triple taboo, because a lot of times when people hear the name Zina, Zina is traditionally a name that's either of Russian descent because it's shorter for Zinaida, but it's also used in Arabic as well. So a lot of times when people hear Zina, it's like, well, if they've never seen me, then it's kind of like they've already set a certain picture of who it is that they're going to experience or encounter. And then when you hear Castro, it's like, well, Zina Castro, that's kind of odd. But then once I changed my name to Zina Sharperson, then it was a whole different type of animal, because it was like, well, who is this person? So a lot of times when I experience people with Zina Sharperson, let's say, it's not only that. A lot of people are even surprised that I'm of Hispanic descent to even begin with. It's the expectation is that a lot of my Russian students say, well, you know that Zina is a Russian name. And I go, okay, what does that mean really? But you're not Russian. And I'm like, how do you know that? I could be, right? And then when they hear Zina Castro, it's something else, because the expectation is that, of course, they see the color of my skin first. And then after that, I'm a Black woman first, but then I'm Hispanic second. So I always tell people, listen, I am to the core Hondureña. Ni me importa. I am Hondureña primero. Although I was born here in America, my culture, my tradition, the lengua that I speak, it is definitely Latinx. I'm Afro-American, because then my descendants are also from Africa, where we do speak a dialect called Garifuna. but I'm Spanish. I'm Spanish. And as a result of that, my dad never said, my dad always said, never deny who you are, because to deny who you are is to deny where it is that you could potentially be going. So
Right.
I carry that with me. And what happens even in education, as I stated earlier, I'm an advocate. I sit there and I tell anyone, if you have a dream, go for it, because a person without dreams has no vision and and they have no progression. So if a student will sit there and tell me, you know what, well, I was thinking about doing this. Well, why not? Because especially what happens is, what this current generation, where they're very fortunate, when I went to college, computers were just coming out, right? We're talking early 80s, mid 80s, even up until late 80s. Computers were still just really, really coming into play. Now, the beauty of being able to start a business is that not only can you sit there and reach people domestically, but now you can then expand internationally. And anything that it is that you enjoy doing has the ability to become something, a business that you're able to do, because the same way that you need it, so does someone else. So why not take that chance and put it out there? Because a lot of times in life, we end up taking chances on things that we don't necessarily get the outcome that we thought that we would get. So I always say, go for it. I encourage students that who would have thought that sneakers would have become a multi-trillion-dollar business, and sneakers exchanging and things like that. Or even now, the return of vintage clothing, right? That's a multi-billion-dollar business as well. So there's opportunity, but the only way that you know if it has the chance of growing or not is if you approach it and see what happens.
See that, I'm listening to you talk, and I'm hearing a few different things. Like, one of the things I think is perception, right? As Latinx
Mhm.
young people go out into the business world and venture into, new ideas and things like that, the perception from outside of who they might be, um, can be really convoluted, can be really mixed. And I remember an
Mhm.
exercise we used to do in our multicultural marketing class, where we would ask the student, well, two questions: what are you and where are you from? Right? Which are sort of politically incorrect questions. You really shouldn't go up to someone and say that.
Right.
It, that shouldn't matter, really. I mean, the way it comes out, sometimes it comes out wrong. But these students were game for this. They wanted to, to experience the whole thing. And you never know where someone is from. So, that lack of accurately pinpointing a person could lead to challenges, obstacles for that person. Once they find out maybe that they're this or that, that could be an issue. So that's one thing. The second thing that I think, is something that's an obstacle, is something that is maybe the lack of education, or this desire to educate yourself. And I think we talked about that too a little bit. This need to just convey to students that they need to build that skill set. Tell me a little bit more about that, because it sounds to me like you have quite an incredible set of skill sets and training in different areas. What are some of the areas that I think, particularly Latinx students, should focus on in terms of their training?
Networking is very, very important, because through networking you establish relationships that you wouldn't necessarily have if you didn't do so. I always present students as a plate of food, right? It's about the protein, it's about the vegetable, it's about the starch, right? And what I always explain
I like
to
that.
my students when I was teaching as well is that you're a package, right? So it's not enough just to have the education. It's also your presentation skills, it's your diction, it's your interviewing skills, it's your resume, it's work experience. All those things are very, very important, because the more that you know and the more experience and knowledge that you gain, if eventually you decide that you want to open up something of your own, then you can apply all those skill sets that you've learned. So there's such thing as a hard set. There's soft skills and there's hard skills, right? So I tell students all the time, listen, if you have a professor that you feel that you can relate to, and that relates well with you, why not ask that professor to mentor you? Or for that matter, I tell students, let's say if there's a club that in school that they don't necessarily have. Why not create your own club? And then that way it gives an opportunity for you to be exposed to other students that may have the same questions or may have the same curiosity that you may have. I always sit there and I tell students, it's funny because a lot of times when students first initially meet me, they feel that I'm very mean. I think I'm a nice person. I don't think I'm mean at all. But what I do is, right, I'm biased, right? But what I do is that a lot of times when I meet someone for the first time, I listen to hear exactly what it is that you need from me, but also to try to understand what you need for yourself. Because once we understand or we come to some form of understanding, I can help you to the best of the ability that I can help you. But after that, if it's that you need help from, if you need help from me for anything, like I always sit there and I tell my students or I tell anyone, I'm an open book, but I also have an open door policy. Because I also try to take a spiritual approach to things where I say, for so much that is given, so much is expected, right? So if I know of an easier way, or if I know something that can potentially lead you to something, I'm the first one to sit there and tell you, listen, you can do it this way, you can find, or if you need to find something, you can find it over here at this place, at this time, for this price. That's me, right? So I tell students that it's very, very important to network. And again, to gain as much experience as you need to, because the more experience that you have teaches you what it is that you like and what you don't like. And where I had mentioned earlier on, it's like a plate of food. You don't necessarily know if you like food, a particular food, if you never tried it, right? It may look terrible. It may even smell terrible, but it tastes really good. So
let me
you
stop
have to open up yourself.
second. I don't mean to interrupt, but you just said something that's gold,
Okay.
that's really gold, and that is trying new things. Give it a shot, and maybe the idea that you have that you think is going to make you, solve the biggest problem in the world, maybe that's not a good idea. So, jumping in, trying what you like. I can't tell you how many times I hear someone say, my own son, he wanted to be a chef. So Anthony Bourdain, watched this, went and became a chef.
Okay.
Then he jumped into the business. He goes, God, I hate this. I got to be up at, I got to be at 5 prepping food. I work till midnight. I go sleep 4 hours and start all over. I get 1 day off every 2 weeks. It's nonstop, So I think that's a good message, is try things and see if they really fit, right? If that plate of food is really something you want to eat. And I think that's great advice.
True. True, but also to expand on that, Roger, too, I think that what we have to also understand that it's about timing, right? Timing is everything. Because let's say you decide to open up a business right now and it doesn't do as well as expected, doesn't mean that it's not meant to succeed. It just means that it's potentially that it's not time, it's not the right time yet. So always understand that, okay, well, I introduced this new service or I introduced this new product and maybe it didn't take off the way that it should, but understand, don't give up on it, because then now just take that extra time to possibly tweak it so that this way, when the time comes that it is ready, then that's when you release it out into the world. And I think that we have to be very mindful of that, because sometimes because we get that first no, it's like, oh no, then it's not meant to be. It's just that it may not be the right time.
It's funny that you say that about the no. It really is. Yesterday, I was in a room with Chaz Palminteri, the actor, and he was telling students that, what if I told you that you're going to get a lot of no's, but what if I told you that no number 51 is going to be the last no you get before you get that yes, and then everything changes for you? What if I told you? What would you do?
Exactly.
And everyone said, well, he goes, you'd count down the no's. You'd be like, okay, that's no number 4, no problem. Here's no number 5, no problem. Here's 15, no problem, because you're getting there, right? And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. I'm glad that you brought up the thing about the no's. There are a lot of no's, in entrepreneurship and in business.
Yeah, there's a lot of no's. Exactly, but also understand that no doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing. Just understand that any experience, good, bad, or indifferent, it's a learning experience. And you just have to take it from there and brush yourself off and know that it builds character.
Let me talk to you for a minute about the immigrant entrepreneur, because that's another area that I think is really important to touch upon, especially during Hispanic Heritage. This notion that
Okay.
you come like your dad did into this, to this country, but not only does the landscape change, the rules change. I know of many doctors, they're doctors in their home country, and then they come here and they're not doctors because they have to research, do the whole thing all over again because it's not, and that's a tough thing for a
Mhm.
person to deal with. Tell us about the immigrant experience. And I know you have some with your dad, but this notion that an immigrant would want to come to this country and start their own business, what kind of things do you think they face, and what kind of things should they avoid?
Yeah, it's difficult because what happens, rather than looking on what the difficulties are, looking at what the advantages are. Like I always try to look at the better side of the good side of things.
I love it.
Um, as a as a as an immigrant here to this country, I think that it's important that once you learn the English language, you have the ability then to service not only people that speak English, but as a native of whatever country that you come from, you're able to relate to your own, which then motivates because there's nothing better than, again, as I mentioned, to look up in the front of a classroom or to look at a business owner and sit there and say, wow, that business owner is just like me. And it inspires people to say, well, if they can do it, so can I. Um, my dad, when he came to this country, didn't speak any English at all. But what he did do is when he attended school, he also made sure that he took classes in order to get rid of his accent. So when he was conducting business, you would never have thought that my dad was from a foreign country. But yet, when he was amongst his family and everybody, he was at Ico Castro, you know. And what he did is that because he was so determined and strong willed in the sense that he was going to make a life here in this country, he used those no's, he used the rejection, he used all of the negative things as stepping stools to achieve the goals in which it is that he wanted to achieve. So that's why I believe that everyone has the potential to do whatever it is that they want to do, regardless of where it is that you come from, because everyone deserves opportunity. And if someone tells you that you can't, then you sit there and prove them wrong and say that I can. Because again, there's a need, may not necessarily be in the community in which it is that you ideally want to see yourself in for that moment. But again, in timing, you can eventually then serve your immediate community. You start small and then you build outside of that.
I love it. I want to sidetrack a little bit because I know you've talked a lot about your students, and we know that you teach at Brooklyn, right? At Brooklyn College.
Yes, I teach Brooklyn
Tell
College,
us,
yes.
tell us what you teach, and tell us, what department it is, that sort of stuff. Tell us a little bit about your teaching work.
Okay, so I teach two classes. I teach professional development and success, and I also teach business and finance in the contemporary world. And they're both in the business school, the Koppelman School of Business at Brooklyn College. I've taught for a couple of years now, enjoy it immensely. I really, really enjoy it. Because I think that, again, it's important for students to be able to see other of whatever descent. I think it's important that for students to see people, people that look like them. Also, historically, when I'm teaching, not only do I give a bit, from the business aspect, but I try to also incorporate culturally how it is important that we give back to our communities, and how we can do that, and also encourage the aspects of entrepreneurship and multiple streams of income and all of that. Because what the pandemic has proven, right? I mean, this pandemic has been extremely difficult on everyone.
Yeah.
A lot of people have lost jobs and really didn't have any other means as far as to support their families, so they had to rely on government assistance and things like that. And of course, yeah, you rely on that, but at some point that runs out. So then what do you do? So again, I think that it's important that we build wealth of our own where we can. And by doing that is, yeah, working for someone, but also possibly at some point being your own boss and being able to make your own rules and kind of run business the way that you would like to see a business run.
Yeah, or a little bit of both, right? I mean,
Exactly.
we all sort of do that. I'm an entrepreneur too, but I work at the entrepreneurship level with the BLP at Brooklyn College, and I teach marketing courses. So yeah, it's that whole notion of eggs in different basket. I
Mhm.
am going to stop here for 1 second and just say to the students that, it's really important that you build your educational background, that you take classes. And for the Brooklyn College students, I can't recommend enough looking up Professor Sharperson and taking her course, because anything you do in life is really about professional development, right? And it's about
Mhm.
understanding finance and things like that. And especially as an entrepreneur, those are the skills that you're going to need. So that's why I stopped and I said, let's talk about your classes, because they're invaluable. They have to take your classes.
And also, what I encourage students too, from a business standpoint, is that marketing, right? Marketing is very important also because, let's say, for example, as consumers, we say marketing, it's how a product is displayed or how it's advertised, whether it's on television, radio, or whatever. But we also have to understand that us ourselves, that we're a product as well. So let's say
Love
when
that.
you interview,
Yep.
for a job, you have to present yourself in a way that not only is the company willing to take and hire you, but also understand that you also have to interview that company in which it is that you're potentially considering of working for. So understand that it's an exchange. So it's not only as a consumer, you have to also understand that you're a product as well. And in addition to that, from the entrepreneurial standpoint, whatever the product or service it is that you're looking to create, you then have to understand how it is that you can then present that product to your public, to the public that you want to serve. So I always encourage students to take an introduction to marketing class because it'll help them in a variety of different areas in which it is that they're,
I am
you know, running.
so happy that you said that. When I teach sales, I tell my students, you're selling all the time. From the minute you talk to someone and you're trying to convey who you are, that's a form of sales, of marketing, right? And marketing is everywhere. So you can't exist in this landscape, or as the academics like to call it, this ecosystem, right? You can't exist
Exactly.
without that skill, without at least knowing how it works, how marketing works. And for the entrepreneur, it's one of the most important things. And you mentioned something else which I think is really key to this whole conversation, and that is surrounding yourself with people that represent different cultures, that represent you, because we are, a city of many different cultures here in New York, and a country of many different cultures.
Mhm.
This landscape that we're, currently in, where immigration is such a, hot topic. I mean, right now, the mayor is looking where to place 16,000, immigrants
Mhm.
that were, sent from the border states here, in very inhumane manner, and, just completely just thrown to New York with no
Mhm.
consideration to them. But how does that change? How does that change the landscape in terms of business, do you think? Does it create opportunities? Does it create challenges? What's your spin on that, or your feeling on that, as far as this new immigration thing that's happening across the country?
I think that I mean, the more people, the merrier,
I
as the
think so
saying
too.
goes. The
Good.
more the merrier, right? Because I mean, the more people that come, that means that there's a more demand for something, right? Whatever that something may be. So bring it on. Bring it on. It's unfortunate that the conditions and the state of how it is that potentially, like, we don't really right now have an idea as to what that landscape is going to look like.
No,
But
we
the
don't.
thing is, we have no idea, and it's a work in progress like anything else. But I think that, yeah, bring them on because there's more of a demand for something, right? And as long as we keep our noses low and we really observe what's going on, there's going to be a lot of business opportunities that are going to be able to come about as a result of everyone coming here. It's just
Yeah.
whoever is willing to take on the challenge.
And that's an interesting thought, because I'm thinking, we're here as entrepreneurs, those of us there are, to solve problems, and that's a problem. So maybe someone out there can figure out, a solution to that problem that can help them, and create new opportunities for a lot of people. So
Exactly.
as we get to the final part of the interview, I want to talk to you about a nugget, an idea, a piece of advice that you would give to, yeah, let's focus not just on our Latinx students, but just anyone young out there who's looking to become an entrepreneur, looking to, maybe get just a side gig even, because we all have side gigs, right? What's your
Mhm.
advice to them? What's that one piece of advice that's the most important that you can offer?
And this is going to sound really, really taboo. It's going to sound, no, not taboo, but very cliche, right? Everyone sits there and says there's no such thing as a dumb question, right?
Right.
And it's true. There's no such thing as a dumb question, because 99.9% of the time, if you're sitting anywhere, sitting in a classroom or wherever you are, if you're thinking it, everyone else is thinking the same thing, except for those people that may think that they know it all, right?
Right.
So, yeah, so my thing is that there's no such thing as a dumb question, but there's also no such thing as a dream there's no such thing as a dream that doesn't require attention. So it starts with you, it ends with you. So whatever happens in between, there's no resolve unless you just do it, like Nike would say, right?
Just do it.
So go ahead, try it. You don't know if you're not going to like it or not. You just have to try it. Don't allow anyone to stamp on your dreams, because they're yours, and no one understands it any more than you do. So again, as Nike says, just do it. A lot of what you accomplish has a lot to do with the circles in which it is that you move in. There's strength in numbers, so which means that if you feel and think, or if you feel or think about something and feel that it needs to be changed, again, a lot of other people feel the same way. So collaborate with each other and just do it.
Just do it, and
Just do
get a team, get help, right? Don't try to,
Exactly.
you might start on your own alone, but yeah, it's important to collaborate. I think that's a key thing in all business, is to have people that can do what they can do best.
Exactly. And on top of that, don't be afraid to ask for help, because I think a lot
Right.
of times we feel that we need to do it alone. And that's not it's not true at all. You have to also surround yourself with people that may have some expertise in that area, and ask the proper questions, but do your research beforehand. Because really and truly, sometimes it's going to require that you roll up your sleeves and really get in the ditch and, clean up things a little bit on your own also. But it's helpful to have an idea, do your research, and then once you kind of have the questions that you need answered to satisfy your curiosity, then that'll build from there, and then it'll open up additional questions that you may have to take you to another level. So research, but also try to get in contact with people that can help you, because help is a big part of it also.
Well, Zina, I can't tell you enough how much fun it is talking to you, because you are a
Thank you.
well of wonderful information and advice and life experience. And I think that's something that's so important for our youth, especially going into this very strange post-pandemic competitive weird world that has become so digital and so different from what we experienced growing up. So yeah,
Yeah. And
I,
it's interesting that you say that, because before the pandemic, no one wanted to do anything online, right? No one wanted
right.
to do anything. And now, and everyone's like, well, when are we going to go back to the way it was? Well, guess what? It's not going back to the way it was. There's a new normal, right, that we have to adjust to, because change is inevitable, right?
Yep.
Change is inevitable, and you have to be able to adjust with the times. And it's one thing to from the entrepreneurial standpoint, it's one thing to, at one time, it was only strictly brick and mortar where you had a storefront and you did your
Yeah.
business from there. And now everything is online. I mean, you could be here in New York and you could service someone all the way in the UK or in China or in Honduras or in Cuba,
Yeah.
right? So the beauty of being able to do business is that you can do it anywhere and be
That's
stationed in one place and service anyone everywhere.
That is so true that you say that. And you said change is inevitable. And I worked at El Diario. I was the general manager there. And Rosanna Rosado, whenever she sent an email,
Okay.
she had a tagline that says change is inevitable. And
Inevitable.
yeah, and we're talking about years ago. So that's incredible foresight. She was seeing the big change way ahead of time. I thank you very much. Where can students reach out to you? Maybe if it's to take your class, or maybe if it's just to chat with you, if you're open to that. What's a good way for folks to reach out to you?
Well, I can be reached at Z Sharperson, so my first initial last name at gmail.com. So they can feel free to reach out to me at any time. Like I said, I'm an open book, and I'm also a vessel to serve anyone. So if there's anything that you want to ask, or if you just want to say hi, that's cool too. But again, it's zsharperson at gmail.com.
Wow, thank you, Zina, and thank you for being on
Thank
the
you.
show. It's really a pleasure. And I just want to tell the folks out there, do take advantage of reaching out to Professor Sharperson. I think it's all about who you know and who you can meet and networking, as she said, and so take advantage of that. That's it for our show on entrepreneurial perspectives during Hispanic Heritage Month for this particular show. Come back. There'll be many more interviews throughout the year, not just for Hispanic Heritage. And please share with your friends and fellow students. And on that note, thank you again, Zina.
Okay, thank you so much, Roger, for having me.
My
Enjoy your
pleasure.
day. Okay, thanks.